Okay, this is a hitting analysis, Mizzou baseball hitting experience analysis for Caleb Caraker. This is Hunter Mintz, assistant baseball coach here at Missouri. First off, we appreciate you um, doing this. We appreciate you attending the experience. Hopefully, it's been a good experience for you. Hopefully, we can see you out for some other camps. Here's how this is going to work. I'm going to go ahead and play and have your video analyzed just by yourself for the first 8 minutes, okay? And then for the second 8 minutes, second part of this video analysis, I'm going to put you up and split you up screen by screen next to a big leaguer. Okay, so I think it'll be really cool for you to see some things within your swing, and then it'll be really cool to see the things that we talk about changing within your swing next to a big leaguer who does it well. Okay, so for the first part of this, I'm going to go ahead and just press play. I'm going to let it play through, and I'm going to let you watch it. This is in super slow motion, so you get to see quite a bit. Okay, so the way I like to do these is I always like to start off at the stance. And so if we're looking at your stance, pretty good, to be completely honest with you. I really like it. One thing that we always got to make sure of is this back knee is inside of our back foot, and you're in a great spot. That's one thing that younger kids struggle with, and so you've already got yourself in a really good position. Let's look at your hands. In a great spot. I like them up high by your ear, right on your shoulder. I think that's a tremendous spot to have them. That's a good starting point to get your hands back. Let's look at your eyes. Both of them pointed out here on the picture. Great. Look at your back foot. So if we're drawing a line from your heel through your toe, okay, so let me do this with the angle here. So this is starting point right there. Okay, so we're at 36 degrees right there. Okay, so what we would want, preferably, and this is just a tiny little change that you can make, is for this thing to be straight, dead set ahead. Okay, so if we're looking at the screen, it's pointed straight, and then instead of 30, whatever that degree was, it'd be 0 degrees. Okay, so otherwise, this is really good. The stance is really good. So let's play this forward a little bit. Okay, so here's where we're going to start making some changes and doing some things a little bit differently. Okay, so now watch what happens so if we're going to draw a circle around your hands. Okay, so that's where your hands are now. Okay, so when your foot lands, look at where your hands are at. Okay, so ultimately what we would want is, this is called walking away from your hands. And when you walk away and when you take your stride, to get the most out of your swing, we still want our hands to be in that same spot. So we're imagining almost that we're holding on to something. If we have a net back there behind us, we're holding on to that net with our fingers, and we're walking away and creating some separation. Okay, and what that separation does is it gives us a lot of torque in here. So in our midsection, we're creating torque. You hear all the time, guys, hitters need to have a strong core, strong midsection, and this is the reason why. Because the longer you can keep your hands back and the further you can walk away from your hands, you start building up all this power in your core, all this torque in your core, and then what it does is when it releases, boom, you're in a great spot to go. Okay, so the second part of this is when you do get your hands back, we need to get your hands back with your elbow back behind your hands. Okay, so let me explain a little bit what that means. If we're looking at, and we're looking at just this section right here, that section right there, I shouldn't be able to see your elbow. Okay, so what happens then is, if my elbow drops below my hands, or my elbow is closer to my body than my hands are at this point, what ends up happening is I end up whipping the barrel through in a manner that I don't want to. Okay, it ends up being long and drawn out with your swing as opposed to a little bit shorter. And we can make up for it in front toss, and we can make up for it in tee work, but it'll be hard when you get to a game when you're trying to make up for some timing errors, because those are always going to happen. Okay, so at this point, when you get your foot down, and I can show you next to a bigger when I put it up, but we want our hands and our elbow to kind of be in line. Okay, and what that'll do is it'll cause for easier connection when we do get to that point. Okay, so connection is something I'm going to talk about here in a minute, actually right here. Okay, so here's what we want. When we're looking at connection here, okay, so when we get to our back hip, in our back side, we want our elbow and our hands to reach that point at the same time. Okay, so if we're looking at this, can you tell which one gets there first? Yeah, by a long ways, it's your back elbow. Okay, and that really all comes from that stance and walking away from your hands, and your hands being in line with your elbow. And what that does then is it creates so much more power that we're driving everything through from here going forward. Okay, and what happens is if we get disconnected, then nothing's working in sync. And ultimately, we want this process to somewhat work in sync with everything on the backside. We can create the most power working from being in sync on the backside. Okay, so that's the next thing. Now, your bat path ends up being pretty good. I really do like this. Like, you get on plane back here, and then you're on plane, on plane, on plane. Okay, now, here's what I want you to see. Okay, at this position, you're not in a bad spot. Okay, your elbows kind of tucked back in just a little bit, and you're pushing that towards the third baseman a little, but you're not in a bad spot. Now, here's what I want you to see. Okay, so as we extend, we want this barrel to go straight from here to here, our hands to go from here to here, and our head to stay here. Okay, let's watch what happens. Okay, we come off of it a little bit, our head starts drifting forward a little bit, so there's more in there. And I'll discuss this here when I get into the next part with the side-by-side.